Thank you for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored tonight. We know an Ohio police officer turned himself in nearly a year after a shooting where he left a 21-year-old pregnant woman shot and killed in her car. We had a chance to talk about it with our expert, Greg Dupree, with TLAC Now, and he's also a former police officer. Let's take a look.
Stop. Hey, out of the car. 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 They said you stole stuff, do not leave. Get out of the car. Then get out. No. Shots fired. Shots fired. Stop the car. Stop. Car.
And joining us now on The Factor Uncensored, we have with us Greg Dupree from TLAC Now, a former law enforcement officer in several cities around the country. Greg, when you take a look at this story, this is not cut and dry like most of the cases that we've seen. You can't ignore seeing the videotape of her shoplifting, but that doesn't mean she should have been killed as a result of stealing liquor from a liquor store. Your thoughts on the grand jury now indicting Officer Connor Grubb in the death of Takia Young?
Exactly, Isaiah. You hit it on the head. Yes, it appears clear that, she was shoplifting, but that's not a death sentence in any state in this country. You have to ask yourself this question, and this is one question about the whole thing that just bothers me more than anything else. Why would you stand in front of the car? Why would the police officer stand in front of the car? And then he pulls his gun out, meaning that he was looking for a confrontation with a shoplifter. He was clear in his mind that it was okay with him to use deadly force against a shoplifter. And so, he put himself in the position that he could use deadly force by being in front of the car in the first place. There's not a police department in this country that trains you to stand in front of a car. If anything, they train you how to get out of the way. But for that officer to put himself in that position, he instigated this situation, or as I said before in the last time I was on, he escalated this situation. So he was looking for that deadly encounter.
Now, not only is Takia Young dead, but her unborn child, because she was pregnant as well. When you take a look at this case and the indictment from the grand jury in Ohio, which came down against Officer Connor Grubb just this week, is that enough? Is the charges strong? Are the charges strong enough?
I would have to see what exactly, aside for the video was provided to the grand jury to know that for sure, and what were their options as far as charges go. At this point, I would say the charges are sufficient, but as I said, I wasn't privy to what they were prevented with. If it had been me, the charges would have been a lot steeper if I had had that option.
And we have murder, involuntary manslaughter, and what, for those who are wondering, is felonious assault?
Mere fact that he used a weapon in the commission of the act, and that made it a felony. We call it aggravated assault here in Texas, but the mere, from what I understand, it was the fact that he used a weapon in the commission of that crime. Now, I want to go back for a second. I was just thinking about what you said. Involuntary manslaughter, there was nothing involuntary about this. It's just they might have charged him with murder, and involuntary manslaughter might have been one of the lesser included charges in this. But murder is good enough because it shows at least he had that criminal intent. So I agree and applaud that grand jury for coming back with that indictment.
And of course, he was on desk duty, or I can't think of the terminology they use for police officers, but he wasn't on the street. He was relieved of duty, obviously with pay, until this decision was made. But this doesn't mean he will be terminated immediately. They'll look at the outcome of the case, or they decide now.
Right. It's normal procedure for departments to place an officer involved in an incident like this, to place him on desk duty or administrative duty until they get the outcome of the trial. They afford him his due process, and as a result of the due process, even if he's cleared, and the jury finds him not guilty, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll keep his job, but more than likely he won't.
And of course, looking at this case, Greg, your thoughts on yet here is another black person being shot by a white officer. You can't ignore the elephant in the room. What's your assessment of that as a
Exactly.
law enforcement officer? Is there a lack of value in black lives?
You know, Isaiah, it's like I said the last time I was on the show. Why is it always us? You know, it's always the police coming up with an excuse as to why their actions resulted in the death of someone black. You know, you don't see them explaining that away for any other race as much as they do for us. And as I said before, it comes down to respecting a person's humanity, even if they're a criminal. You know, and this woman, you know, they had evidence that supported her being accused of shoplifting. But even so, as I said before, that's not a death sentence. And you always should be striving as an officer of the law to treat everybody as with dignity and respect as much as you can. And obviously, from the time he got in front of the car and drew his weapon, that was not his intent. You have to see people as humans. And if you don't see people as human, you're not going to treat them that way. And it just seems like this is just a common occurrence with some within the law enforcement community.
When you have an incident like this in an agency involving one of the officers, do they consider the administration, the police chief, do they consider retraining or refresher courses for everyone after an incident like this happens, or do they go on with their business?
Well, it depends on the individual department. I know when I was in Houston, my time in HPD, we had an incident similar to this. It didn't result in death, but an officer was standing in front of the car when they were contacting the subject, and the car rolled forward, and he shot through the windshield. And they immediately came out and, you know, the big question was, as I said earlier, why were you standing in front of the car? We didn't train you to stand in front of the car. And then when the memos went out to stress this, to all officers during a roll call, this is not standard operating procedure for us. So don't place yourself in that situation, because by doing so, you know, you could escalate the situation just like it occurred here.
All right, Greg Dupree, we'll see what happens, and we'll stay in touch with you when we get a decision from a jury when this goes to trial. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored.